Welcome to Bible/Chat. Hope you're doing well. We're chatting about the Bible. Jason, are we chatting about the Bible?
Yes.
Good.
I got lost in a thought
that's
there.
okay. What were you thinking about?
My head hurts.
Like, seriously, I know. We've been talking about angels
Sorry.
and demons and good angels, bad angels. Can they fall?
Yeah.
Will they fall?
Well,
Have they fallen?
yeah.
What do they do? Are they in charge of all sorts of calamities on the earth and nations and all sorts of things?
Uh-huh.
So this kind of brings up a topic which I think is probably important. The question is, do all bad things that happen in the world come because of Satan?
Yeah.
Is Satan just actively, through his demonic forces, bringing about bad things? Everything that's bad in the world, cancer and wars and murders and all that stuff. Is it all inspired and actuated by Satan and his demons?
I would, in a nutshell, I would say, I don't know if everything is, like some of the realities of the evil of the world is because we live in a fallen world. Yeah. And it's hard to say that Satan is necessarily behind every single person that does something bad, or every single cancer, or every single car accident. That's hard to say. I think he's behind a lot. Yeah. But I think he's behind a lot specifically, like spiritually, like against the church and using false teaching, things like that, which is much worse than a disease, right? Because eternal souls are on the line, right? Totally. Like he takes away the gospel when someone hears it, that parable. Yeah. But ultimately, even the devil, along with all of his minions, are under the sovereign control of God. That's our comfort and our hope. Like it's not a equal battle. It's not like good versus evil. We'll wait and see who wins. No, but light has already overpowered the darkness. There's no way that God can lose, or that's not even a possibility. He's always won. He's always already in victory. And we know that he's sovereign over literally everything, because in Isaiah 46:8, we talked about this right before the video, but he tells through Isaiah to the nation, remember this and be assured, recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things long past, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is no one like me. And why is there no one like him? Because he declares the end from the beginning, verse 10. Yeah. And from ancient times, things which have not been done, like lots of parts of Isaiah. And says, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure, including using evil Babylonians to take down Judah, including using evil Assyrians to take down an evil northern kingdom of Israel, Samaria. Including using all sorts of things like that as secondary causes to fulfill his plans, his purposes. So under his sovereignty, you have all these things that are happening. God is not like the absent watchmaker who just kind of turned it on and then left it, like the deistic God. But he is actively involved in all of these things through secondary causes, using even demons and his demonic forces for his ultimate purposes, which are for his glory and for the good of his people. Which is, this goes back to the whole issue of, well, if God's sovereignty and human responsibility or demonic responsibility or whatever. And what we're saying is God is not responsible for sin. He cannot be tempted. That he doesn't tempt to sin. But he is in sovereign, full, absolute, perfect control over everything, including all the spiritual forces and all the calamities that they bring about. And in fact, in one sense, if you go to was it Isaiah? We're still in Isaiah. Isaiah 45:7. It says there that God actually creates calamity. And that word can be used for lots of things, like evil, disaster. It says in 45:7 that the one forming light and creating darkness, right? Genesis 1, causing well-being and creating calamity. I am the Lord who does all these. And so, like, whatever that is, it's everything. So when we ask, wait, is God responsible for this or for that? We'll say in an ultimate sense, yes. We always have to have the caveat, though, because it's super important. Without sin, but he is in control of all those things, just as much as he's in control of the devil, in our lives, and all the little things that happen everywhere around the world from the beginning of time all the way to the end. He's in control over every single one.
So God is absolutely sovereign over everything. And then within that complete sovereignty, he uses secondary causes
always
to cause things to happen. Oftentimes calamitous events.
Oftentimes. I mean, if you just look at the history of Israel, you would say, like, wow, God is so Like, he's just judging them and punishing them. I mean, he told them he would, but I didn't know he would carry it out.
Yeah.
And you see all these bad things happening to them through bad people. I mean, that's the whole, like, a lot of the minor prophets are like Habakkuk.
Yeah.
Lord, like, you're holy. Like, how can you send the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, a people worse than us, and we're your people?
To accomplish this,
And God's like, you don't understand.
You have no idea what I'm talking about.
And what Habakkuk does is I waited like a watchman in silence.
Yeah.
And I was just going to wait for the Lord.
Yeah.
And the Lord answered him and said, I'm this glorious God whose purposes you cannot fathom, but I can even use an evil people to accomplish my glory in the end. And what does Habakkuk do? At the end, he comes to a place of humility and faith where he says, even if everything is gone, I'm still going to trust the Lord and rejoice in him. Which is
because ultimately he's good.
Yeah. Ultimately, he knows the love of God.
Yeah.
He knows the promise of the Messiah. He knows that there is a glorious salvific future awaiting Israel and others.
Yeah, totally.
And so he's like, I'm good.
Yeah, I just trust God.
He's like, I'm quivering because I know the Chaldeans are coming. But then he says at the same time, like, everything could be devastated.
Yeah.
But I'll still trust the Lord.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're trusting God's goodness, even though under God's sovereignty, bad things are happening in His control.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. We were talking about this before, but in Jeremiah 51, starting in verse 20, it says, He says, so God is speaking here, and he's talking now to Nebuchadnezzar. He says, you are my war club, my weapon of war. And then he says, with you I shatter nations, with you I destroy kingdoms. And he goes through all these I shattered this, I shattered that, I shattered this, I shattered that. And he's saying, I'm using you like a club, Nebuchadnezzar. I'm holding you like an inanimate club, and I'm carrying this out, my weapon of war. And then verse 24, he says, but I will repay Babylon and the inhabitants of Chaldea for all their evil they have done in Zion before your eyes, declares the Lord. So he says, I'm doing all this, and I'm going to judge you. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And what that tells you is, while he's while he's the primary cause of all those things happening, Nebuchadnezzar was not a helpless victim of God's plan, right? He had his own willful desires to do those things and is therefore punished for his sin. Yeah. So crazy to see those things fit together.
Yeah, the primary and secondary, and that is so important, but it still blows my mind. I think.
There's no answer to that.
He calls Cyrus his anointed, using the same word for Messiah. Anointed to do all these things, like bad things, and then also good things, like letting the Jews go back to Jerusalem. But it's just crazy to think. But it's real. That God is actually controlling empires and nations, and down to the kings. The king's hearts, is in his hands, like the channels of water, right? Proverbs. Yeah, so it's just amazing that God is fully in control over good and over evil, without being evil himself in any way, shape, or form, because he can't be. He's absolutely holy, and yet if you have a God who is not in control, then there's no hope.
Yeah,
and it's just like, well, what's the purpose of life? Why live? Why any of these things? There's no answer for the problem of evil then.
Totally, yeah. There's no answer for anything. At that point,
And the Bible does have an answer. It's hard, but I think, when you were going through Romans 9, that's the point. If it weren't hard, then we're just dealing with a human, a creation of man, rather than the eternal, almighty, infinite God.
Yeah. So, like, even these kinds of things, when you have this, like, apparent paradox in Jeremiah 51, or the apparent paradoxes that show up in those places in Scripture, like when David numbers the people, incited by Satan, incited by God, David numbers the people, and God judges David and the nation of Israel. So, like, why are you doing this? When you come to those places, it's not that the authors of those texts were just totally irrational people.
Not at all.
They're describing a God who is above our comprehension level. Then there may be apparent paradoxes to us, but those are not real.
And they're not contradictions.
Yeah, they're not contradictions.
It's just because we have this big of a brain.
God is huge. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Well, so at the end of the day, if someone said, does Satan cause all bad things? We would say, well, he causes some.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, ultimately, God is in control of all of those things and causing things to happen and not happen, but using secondary means who are still responsible for their evil desires and behaviors.
Wow. That's awesome.
And how can we reconcile those two things? I can't perfectly, because he is God and I am not him.
And so I don't have the responsibility even to do that.
No, never. That's the thing about Bible writers. They knew these apparent paradoxes. They're not dummies. These are smart guys. And the Spirit inspired these words.
Yeah.
And the Bible, like, it has those things, like, in tension with each other, like the whole David numbering thing. Satan, God, which one? Both. And you could easily clean that up and say, we're going to get rid of the Satan or the God one and just make it Satan.
Just make it Satan,
They left it together. And it just shows, like, No one can come up with that.
No, yeah. No one made that up.
No. It's God. There's no other explanation.
That's awesome.
And so I think what you're saying, too, is like you got to take it by faith.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is not something just like purely rational where we're like, okay, I put this together and primary, secondary, causal, because people can still struggle with that.
Of course.
But I think we would say that at a certain point, it is like, I accept it by faith, Lord, even though I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I trust you that you're good, and especially in light of the cross, I know that you're good and your purposes are always loving, despite my inability to comprehend some of these things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can't understand it, but at the end of the day, I know you're good.
Yeah.
And I just have to trust that.
Amen.
Oh, that's awesome. Very good. Well, I hope that's helpful for you about God's sovereignty and Satan and evil things that come into our lives. Jason, thanks so much.
No,
Appreciate
thank you.
And we'll cover some more topics next time. Thanks.